Good afternoon, everybody. As always, my name is JC, and welcome to my channel, Every Man's Thoughts. Before I get started, I really want to say thank you so much to all of my Lord of the Rings on Prime followers. The videos I make on this subject get far more views than anything else I do, especially for my very small YouTube channel. And there's usually a pretty lively discussion in the comments section as well, which is also greatly appreciated. Thank you guys, and with that, let's get started. I wanted to create a video discussing why I'm still optimistic because I've noticed as time has passed, there is a growing negative perception towards the show. Amazon and those responsible for the series in general have done themselves a serious disservice with the excessive level of secrecy. Lack of information creates a vacuum, and a vacuum is a breeding ground for third-party narratives. The internet being the internet, those narratives are likely to be both speculative and negative. If you recall, I've already made a video sort of documenting the misinformation, so today we're just going to talk about reasons why you and I should have a positive outlook. The first one that comes to mind are dwarves. Now, when we received official confirmation that we would likely see extensive storylines covering the dwarves, I was ecstatic. But I think a lot of the things that the dwarves bring to the table sort of slipped under the radar after the initial announcement. There are two aspects that I find intriguing. The first is obvious, it's, the dwarves themselves and their culture. With the announcement of the Second Age timeline, there was naturally a lot of conversation about Galadriel, Elrond, and elves in general, but look at what dwarves have to offer. They like to drink, they like to sing, they like to fight. By comparison, elves are stuck in some form of perpetual emo.
I lament to Gandalf.
I'm not talking the good emo either, the hot chick with the overdone dark mascara you banged behind Dunkin' Donuts in high school. I'm talking the shit emo, that hot chick's younger brother cutting himself in the locker room because he thinks his life is a song by Joy Division. Furthermore, look at some of the problems the dwarves struggled with: pride, greed, rage. By comparison, elves are just aloof and two-dimensional. Also, don't forget the timeline would suggest we're going to see constant battles between the dwarves and orcs. So with all this fertile material, it should be easy to translate the dwarves into compelling storylines and not just comic relief. Earlier, I mentioned that some of the importance of the dwarves kind of slipped under the radar, and that brings us to the second aspect I'd like to talk about, and that's Peter Jackson's dwarves. Peter Jackson set a very high bar in terms of production value for the depiction of Tolkien's dwarves. Like it or not, the new show is going to have to put in the same effort to meet or exceed those production values if they want to maintain any level of credibility. And I'd like to think that that effort will begin to permeate into other aspects of the show. A great example of this is the Netflix adaptation of The Witcher. When your dwarves look like this, you don't mind later in the episode your dragon looking like this. However, let's take a look at Peter Jackson. When your dwarves look like this, your dragon looks like this. Once you start down a path of production quality, you tend to stay on it. The next positive thing for me is the overall ongoing production effort. Now, if we're honest, I think a lot of us have concerns about the relatively unknown cast and inexperienced showrunners. However, we also have to be truthful and acknowledge the amount of effort Amazon is putting forth. They are throwing cash at this production like I do hookers and cocaine when my unemployment check comes in. I'm sorry, what were we talking about? Oh, yeah, money. If the Netflix adaptation of The Witcher proved anything, it's that you can have a massive budget and still have mediocre visuals on screen. Obviously, we all hope Lord of the Rings on Prime avoids this fate, but realistically, for a series of this scope, if Amazon wasn't handing over cash by the barrelful, it would have guaranteed it. So let's give credit where it's due and recognize Amazon for spending the money as needed to do the job right. The other part of the ongoing production I'm quite pleased with is the decision to film on-site in New Zealand. Not only does staying in New Zealand offer the best opportunity to deliver the highest possible quality, but it also guarantees unavoidable comparisons to Peter Jackson's work. Much like the example of the dwarves earlier, This likely locks them into a very high minimum quality standard that the fans will accept, and that's just good for all of us. The last thing I want to say about the ongoing production efforts is, from an outsider's perspective, it sure does look like Amazon is going to use the Lord of the Rings IP to tentpole their entire streaming service. A great example of this is the Disney Plus business model. They acquired the rights to the Star Wars universe, knocked out a couple of movies, and then transitioned to serialized TV shows like The Mandalorian, which will ostensibly hold the subscriber base for a longer period of time. We now know that they have several more Star Wars-related TV show storylines in development. In fact, we can probably take a look at WandaVision and assume this is the first step in Disney's MCU moving in the same direction. Now let's come back to Lord of the Rings on Prime. They acquired the rights to the Second Age. Then they acquired the rights to the movie. They're filming their first series now, with rumors of several more in development. It's almost exactly cut and paste of what Disney is doing with the Star Wars universe and the MCU. This is all speculation, of course, but if Amazon is planning for the Lord of the Rings IP to be the backbone of their streaming service, this will create tremendous pressure to keep production values very high. As a reference, a lot of bad things have happened to Star Wars under Disney's watch, but none of them had anything to do with low-quality production. Last but not least, before I go, the one thing we can all hang our hat on is, at the end of the day, the Tolkien estate has full veto authority. The passing of Christopher Tolkien does give me pause. Even though he stepped down as head of the family trust in 2017, you have to imagine his thoughts and wishes were still being observed. Although the situation does bear watching, we haven't seen any major changes since he did step away in 2017, so fingers crossed. Well, that's it for me, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please consider a like or a subscribe, and I will see you next time.